It was the kind of gray morning that seemed to stretch on forever. Rain tapped gently against the windows of a small house nestled in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado. Inside, 32-year-old Laura Morgan sat at the edge of her bed, clutching a crumpled tissue and staring blankly at the wall. She had once believed life would be something out of a romantic film, predictable, beautiful, and fulfilling. But in recent months, the brightness had drained from her days. Her marriage had fallen apart, her job felt meaningless, and the loneliness that followed her was like a shadow that refused to lift. Today, it had settled deeper than ever. Laura reached for her phone, not to check messages or scroll social media, but to open her notes app. For the past few weeks, she'd been journaling her feelings on hard days. But something stopped her. She set the phone down and picked up a small wooden box on her nightstand instead. Inside it was a USB drive labeled for when you're lost. It was from her grandfather, Richard Morgan. He had given it to her 2 years ago, just a few weeks before he passed. When the weight of the world feels too heavy, he had told her with a knowing smile, "Listen to this. No matter how dark it gets, this story helped me. Maybe it will help you too." Laura plugged the drive into her laptop and hit play. The recording began with her grandfather's familiar voice, rich and full of life, despite his age. "If you're listening to this," he said, "you must be feeling low. I know that feeling well. But I want to tell you a story, one that isn't dramatic or wild, but real and full of quiet strength." His voice pulled her in like a warm blanket on a cold day. This story begins in 1957, in a small town in Oklahoma. I was just a teenager back then, and the world was very different. My father, your great-grandfather, had just lost his job at the local grain mill. That same week, our house caught fire from a faulty wire and burned to the ground. We had nothing. No money. No food. No roof over our heads. Laura closed her eyes and imagined a much younger version of her grandfather walking among the ashes of his childhood home. My mother, your great-grandma June, was standing in front of what remained of our home, barefoot, covered in soot, but smiling. I'll never forget what she said. She turned to me and said, "We're lucky, Richard. We still have each other, and we still have tomorrow." There was a pause in the recording. I didn't understand her then. I was angry. I wanted to scream at the world. But that night, we slept in the back of a neighbor's pickup truck, and my mother held my hand and hummed a lullaby while I cried. That's when I learned something. Sadness isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign that your heart is still open. Laura's breath caught. Her eyes welled with tears. In the weeks that followed, Richard continued. We rebuilt. Not the house, not yet, but our lives. We cooked simple meals over a fire in the yard. My dad found odd jobs. I helped fix fences and paint sheds for pennies. And every night, before bed, we'd tell stories. Laugh. Cry. Live. Laura could almost hear the crackling of the fire and the quiet strength in that broken-down yard. One morning, my mother asked me to help a new neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Whitaker. He had lost his wife and lived alone with no children. I grumbled about it, but I went. I spent the day cleaning his gutters, chopping firewood, and listening to him talk about his garden. Before I left, he handed me a coin. A silver dollar. It was old and worn, but he said it was lucky. Richard laughed in the recording. I thought it was a silly old man's gift. But that coin stayed in my pocket for 60 years. There was a long silence. Then Richard's voice softened. The reason I'm telling you this is because it's easy to feel like the world is against you when things fall apart. But life isn't about never falling, it's about what we do after the fall. Every painful moment I ever lived through, every heartbreak, every loss, they all led me somewhere better. And even when they didn't, they taught me to keep going. Laura leaned back on her pillows, heart aching but full. There was a woman I once loved, Richard went on. Her name was Elaine. We were supposed to marry. But one morning she left a letter on my doorstep saying she was moving to Chicago and didn't love me the way I loved her. I was devastated. I wandered for weeks, lost and broken. But if Elaine hadn't left, I never would have taken a train out west, never would have met your grandmother in a bookstore on 5th Street, never would have built the family you're part of now. Another pause, this time more emotional. Every sad day in your life can be a doorway to something beautiful. I know it doesn't feel that way now. I know it hurts. But believe me, one day you'll look back and understand why the pain was necessary. The recording faded for a moment, and then her grandfather's voice returned with renewed clarity. I want to leave you with this. When I was in my final days, lying in that hospital bed, I wasn't thinking about my regrets or the money I didn't make. I thought about holding your hand when you were 5 years old at the county fair. I thought about the time your father wrecked my truck and cried because he thought I'd never forgive him. I thought about the quiet moments, coffee on the porch, dancing with your grandmother in the kitchen, and the first snowfall every winter. Laura smiled through her tears. She remembered dancing with Grandpa in the kitchen too. Sadness passes. Sometimes slowly. Sometimes like a thunderstorm. But it always passes. And in its place, if you keep your heart open, joy returns. The audio clicked to a close. But Laura didn't move. She sat there, holding on to every word. She got up slowly, walked to her kitchen, and poured herself a cup of coffee. The rain still drizzled outside, but somehow, it felt softer now, more like a gentle rhythm than a downpour. Later that day, Laura walked to a nearby park, the same one she used to visit with her grandfather when she was little. She brought a notebook and pen, and for the first time in weeks, she wrote not about her sadness, but about her memories, about the strength in her bloodline, the resilience in her DNA, and the lessons stitched into her soul. Each page was a tribute to every person who had ever made it through the storm and come out stronger. Weeks turned into months. Laura found a new job, one that gave her purpose, not just a paycheck. She volunteered at a shelter on weekends. She picked up painting again. Her heart still ached sometimes, but she had learned not to fear the ache. One evening, she recorded her own message onto the same USB drive. She labeled the new file, "For When You're Lost, Part 2. In it, she told her future self the same thing her grandfather had told her. You are not alone. Sadness is just a chapter, not the whole story. And you are more than capable of writing the next page." Years later, Laura gave the same USB drive to her own daughter, Emma, just before she left for college. "Don't listen now," she said with a gentle smile. "But one day, when life gets too heavy, play this. You'll know when. Because in the end, we all carry pain, we all face sadness, and we all have moments when we feel like the sky has turned gray. But in those moments, stories like Richard Morgan's, Ordinary Yet Extraordinary, remind us that sorrow is never permanent, and neither is joy. They come and go, like the tide. And when the tide goes out, we are left with footprints in the sand,